Sioux Nation had gone through some really, really harsh times, some that I can't even imagine. They watched people die, they starved, they fought for their way of life, and they lost.
And what do I do is go back to my store and they made it as far as here. We are here now in Sioux, Nebraska. We consider it our homeland, Sioux, Dakota.
There was probably grief that was unresolved. A lot of families hurting when they were moved here. Their culture changed into a culture of violence. I know this is harsh, but a culture that didn't respect family ties, and a culture that alcohol, for sure alcohol, and moved to drugs, but alcohol to start was their culture.
Domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, those kind of things do exist with our people. There was ways that it was dealt with to make sure that didn't exist with our people.
The culture, and spirituality, traditions, and customs are all there. They're lost.
There were things that were taught to our people to prevent things like that from happening. We lost those things: respect for yourself, respect for others, respect for children, and respect for women.
We no longer have clans or societies. But we do have traditional ways to do it. We're just finding ways to be able to take our people back to that.
I love being Dakota and love our language, our spiritual traditions, and everything that comes with it. To me, that's what's good for me and my family. When I took the position with social services, the two major things that I wanted to accomplish were a domestic violence shelter, which we were sitting in, and a horse program. Native American people have a long history with horses and tribal history.
Making a connection now.
Horses have a natural healing ability, and they are able to read us better than we can read ourselves. I believe in that natural healing ability.
See the horse's body language now? Good.
Most of my work had to do with historical trauma and unresolved grief in Indian communities. The first time I heard about the horse program, I was interested because it said medicine wheel model, and I believe that our community needs to bring back those culturally specific programs in order to heal.
The majority of our cases are out of control youth that are running away, they're drinking, they're drugging, they're partying and not wanting to listen to their parents.
I wouldn't talk to anybody about my problems, and so finally, after stressing and keeping everything bottled up and everything building up, I just finally broke down one day and attempted suicide.
We're a very small community, and so whenever there's these traumatic events, it hits our community pretty hard. We're constantly trying to deal with loss, grief, trauma.
The horses are the big part of bringing that healing to the people. The horses and the children are considered sacred. with the two of them together, working together inside the circle, it creates a healing, in their language they call it daku wakaskaska, something sacred moving inside the circle.
I like that, like, I didn't know what to expect, and I actually really like that. Trying to communicate without talking or touching them. Try to get the horse to warm up and make the horse feel like they can trust you. So, I actually like that.
A lot of times you won't see the outcome until years down the road. So, what we're doing now is planting the seed. So, it's fun to watch it grow. If we want to walk a better way of life for our children, then we need to open our eyes and see what we're doing on our own side as we walk out this land. I was using the methamphetamines. I was so into the drug that, nothing else mattered. I had 7 kids, One of my daughters, she grabbed my arm, she said, Dad, she said, I don't want you, she said, I don't want you to go away with those monsters. And I looked at her, I looked at her and I said, I wanted her to say, what are you talking about? But I understood what she said. So when she said it, it's a hard thing to talk about. I think that's one of the problems with our people is talking about things that really affect us, sharing that. To help our people, to help our youth, we have to see that whatever they're experiencing, so basically what that is, we live in order to live. They have to go back and retract their whole lifestyle. Right now, I think back, things that I've done, reached tears in my eyes, I got all these kids, man, I don't want to die, leave these kids alone at a young age like that. So I had to do something. I had my kids taken away from me twice.
I was there when we had to do that removal of his kids. It was one of those ending points where it was just like, why? I'm really going to do something now. I'm really going to change this for myself and my kids. And so I've seen him make that change.
I've been volunteering for the Fatherhood of Sacred. First I was court-ordered in my past, because of my drug use and being incarcerated and stuff like that. And after I graduated from there, I just kept coming back. Remember if you gave us those worksheets, things that we were going to have to work on and take it and do that? Remember I said one of them was to treat people how I want to be treated. I forget that, especially when something gets triggered.
I don't believe in pushing anything on anybody, but I believe that there's a lot of good that comes out of our traditional spiritual practices.
What matters to me most nowadays is children, my spirituality, my life, my family. I understand it's going to take a long time. I just want to care for people with love. Each and every day.
What that is?
We're all meant to encourage them to.
Eyes aren't square, so.
It's hard for us today, but maybe these children will be able to do that. Maybe we'll be able to see that.
They're not on scene. It's going like this. What are you talking about?
That's my hope, is that these children will be able to help each other, encourage each other
That's all.
to be better people.
There is hope for change. change, call for a lot of healing and relearning how to live a good life.
Hold up.
Yeah, like I said,
So that was 2 videos of a 7 video series that weaves native stories and cultural practices from across the nation to show many of the ways children, families, and communities are healing from drug engagement. All right. Building a coalition to combat meth use. Coalition means the groups of a diverse individuals, organization of individuals who work together to reach a common goal. It's an organization of organizations. By definition, a coalition is not everyone agrees or totally has the same interest. The issue is a specific solution to a problem. When we create this, we ask ourselves, what would the unifying issues be? What resources can come from this organization? And what obstacles might be encountered? Some guidelines for successful coalition building are: they are formed to meet a specific need, understand and respect each group's self-interest, respect each group's eternal process, agree to disagree, structure decision-making carefully, distribute credit fairly, give and take. It's important to build on existing relations and connections with other organizations. Don't just ask or expect support, be prepared to give it. Develop a common strategy. Be strategic. Building coalition requires good strategy to decide what organizations to ask and who will be the one to invite those people to the table.
oh yeah.
And then to ensure consistency,
All right, well,
which means send the same representative to each coalition meeting.
Okay.
This helps meetings run more smoothly. These individuals should also be decision-making members of the organization they represent. And formalize your coalition. It's the best way to make an explicit agreement. Make sure everyone understands what their responsibilities and rights are, and being clear can help prevent conflicts. Before we go into how we're gonna go about that, we have one more thing from Ms. Shawnee here
That you're gonna read.
that she asked me to read. And I think she was talking earlier about after we read these are kind of point of conversations to have that we can have during this afternoon. In 2017, a total of 3,390 people were arrested on meth-related crimes in South Dakota, compared to only 467 in 2002. An increase of 625% during that 15-year period, according to SouthDakotaNewsWatch.org. Where does this leave us in Indian country? Specifically the Peacemaking Indian Reservation. How do we come together as professional leaders, concerned community members, and parents? Those questions plague me for many reasons. Most importantly, what resources do we have right now at our disposal to combat this epidemic? Far too often we rely on OST, DPS to protect and serve our communities. However, we disregard one main component, which is the low manpower at which the department operates. At what cost do our officers face mentally, physically, and spiritually, and constantly having to be the only defense we have against individuals who are on meth? Are we going to continue pushing that onto them in hopes they don't fatigue out from the stress alone? I ask these things, one, because I have no concrete answers or baseline. but also highlighting the lack of effort until a catastrophe happens. We're all guilty of reacting to situations when they happen, but what steps were we taking prior to the state of emergency? How do we shift our mentality to be proactive, not only in this, but in all other areas? Do we host more basketball tournaments in hopes that the same youth participants can refrain from using the drug? That possesses another important question. What about the youth individuals we can't reach through sports? What about the other percentage of teens and children that can't dribble a ball or shoot a basket? Do we toss them to the side and hope they realize they might become the next Michael Jordan? Or can we create a fair baseline for our children that are otherwise talented and give them a chance to flourish in those areas? Give them the same opportunity to showcase what talents they have, and in turn have accomplishments to be proud of. Thus breaking an ever-revolving stigma that the tribe and other agencies only cater to athletes in our communities. Next point I would like to make is, how do we collectively begin to tackle a problem that we don't understand? I would say it is safe to assume that the crowd I am addressing does not have a drug addiction. So if we ourselves don't have a drug addiction, where do we begin? We have already established that jail isn't working. Institutionalizing them for a short amount of time and feeding them into an already backed up court system isn't working. We are doing ourselves and each other a disservice by putting band-aids on a gunshot wound. I have identified, to the best of my knowledge, what programs can utilize best suiting my needs. As a 20-year-old combat veteran, I can walk into almost any program, fill out an application, and I would like to meet some sort of criteria. I share that with you all because I didn't have an easy time navigating the systems or programs. I had to seek long and hard to figure it all out. Now for someone who wants to be clean, who wants to rid themselves of this drug, where would they start? Who do they turn to? What follows? How can we expect someone on meth to navigate our confusing avenues if someone is not using and can barely do so? Doesn't set up anyone up for success. Self-sustaining treatment centers are needed on the Pioneers Indian Reservation. We all know the ones that are here, but what about space? How long will a grant last for? What can we do as a team to build up so that we can continue services, improve them for the people who need them? Unless we begin to start leaning towards banishment for a set amount of time, these are the questions that keep me up at night. These points I've attempted to break down and articulate my young point of view is what I would like answered here as a team so we can make an impact and invoke the change we pray to see. It is on us as leaders to set that standard, to be proactive with our efforts and carry some sort of empathy and compassion. If you as a person are not willing to humble yourself through this process and check your ego at the door and working toward a common goal, maybe combating a meth epidemic isn't for you. I would say that as a mother, a young professional, and a future leader, we need to leave this room with at least one solid solution, or we have failed the very people we serve. So there's a lot of good points and good questions in there, and definitely I think in one or more, there's different people in this room who could answer some of those questions and that are doing something around the work that needs to be done with this. So those are good talking points. Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions or want to comment on any of that?
Can I say something?
Is that in regards to her?
Is that who wrote that?
Yeah.
I'm a tribal advocate in the court system, and Kenny knows if somebody comes in charged with drugs, judge, and they plead guilty, judge wants an alcohol and drug evaluation. They go back to the court or to the jail, and they sit there until what they call luta. They have somebody to come see them. And the inmates have told me one worker will only see 8 people a day. So I have people out there, been sitting out there 88 days, still waiting on an alcohol and drug evaluation. So it's not just CPS, it's luta, it's our COs, because our COs have the authority to transport, but they want to wait until a court order comes out. So we have to file to modify or to ask for transport, and then when they're done with all their stuff to get ready to go to treatment, they have to wait because of what the luta has 8-week cycles, I believe they're called. You only get 8 classes, and then you're supposed to be saved. But we all know to get out clean from that, it could take a year or 2 years. It takes your whole life. You have to learn to live with it in a clean and sober way. But there's no follow-up from the luta, there's no support groups from anybody. And so to me, I see these programs could do more. But when you ask them, they say, it's not in my job description, or I don't have that in my budget. But it takes volunteer time. Some of us advocates, we come here to help people, we don't get paid. I barely get $20 for gas, but I keep coming back. I've seen juveniles arrested for, one had a needle and they identified heroin in that needle. She wouldn't say where she got it. But that juvenile aged out and she came back as an adult criminal. So it's also in the schools. So there's more you programs can do to help us advocates, help the people. But first, you need more personnel who are qualified to do their work. Because the luta, I see some of those alcohol and drug evaluations. They say attend inpatient treatment, follow with aftercare treatment, and stay on that sobriety. But they're dark like me. But if you see a light skin come in, it says abstain from alcohol, doesn't need treatment, but that person came in with methamphetamine, tested positive. So I don't know who does their evaluations or if they're qualified to identify who's on meth and who isn't. Because as advocates, we've been in there so long, when someone comes in for arraignment, you can see they're on meth. When they come back for a pre-trial, which is usually 2 weeks later, you could still see that jittery jumping and, their movements. You can see they're still on meth. And you can see the juveniles are still on meth. But the court, the judge, the luta, they can't see it. And so I see we need people who really care for the people. You can't just get a $50,000 job and say, I'm doing the best I can. So I know you guys are doing the best you can, But I see there has to be a law specific to methamphetamine. In our criminal system, it's identified as 546 and 547. 542 is distribution of methamphetamine. That should be automatic banishment. There shouldn't be no hearing. There shouldn't be chances. It should be banishment. Hand them to the feds and say, that's your problem. And let them prove they're good enough to be amongst the people, amongst their children. I was banished. When I couldn't quit drinking, my father said, don't come back until you're ready to live a clean and sober life. So it took me 2 years before I was allowed to come home. So there has to be stricter laws. Council needs to make one specific to methamphetamine. Because they throw, I think they're called gabbies. They throw oxycodone, and they throw marijuana. Marijuana says you have to have an ounce or more. But they throw people in for a joint, for a roach, for a car smelling like weed. So we need to train our police officers to what the law says. Because I've had people brought in because they had oxycodone in their pocket or gabbies. And I asked the judge, does it say gabapentin? Does it say oxycodone? If not, dismiss it. But they say, the law says, if you have a pill in your pocket that doesn't come from a pill bottle that has your name on it, they can charge you for drugs. So I tell them, I have a vitamin in my pocket. I have a meth breath mint in my pocket. Cop gonna take me to jail because it's not in a bottle? So we have to look at the laws that criminalize our people first. Because 546, 547, those are serious charges. The judge puts $5,000 cash bond on those people. So we have a jail full of people criminalized or penalized because of what the police bring them in on. So all I'm saying is if you guys are gonna have this, then train your people to identify the law. 546 and 547, they also charge them for 209, child endangerment. Child abuse, 207. That's when CPS comes in and starts taking kids out. So we have to come to a balance here. Because the tribe is using our statistics and getting money for that. But where does that money go? It's not helping on Betaluta. It's not helping CPS. CPS is so overworked, understaffed, and probably underpaid. And I keep saying, how come no one's going to council, to the state, and saying, we need more money, we need more staff, but the directors keep coming in and out like a day labor. A day, director lasts maybe 1 to 6 months, then we get another one. We get caseworkers that last 6 months, and by the time we get to a hearing, CPS says, oh, that was an old caseworker, he's no longer here. So we say, okay, dismiss it. And these caseworkers need to know what breach of confidentiality is. Once somebody's been charged, their child's taken away, the whole res knows. I have kids who've been taken away from good families, come back with bed bug bites and head lice. Where are they taking our children when they take them out of the home? Who's watching CPS? So, all I'm saying is I believe this can change. Change can happen, but you have to have your hearts in it too, just like we do. Thank you.
I'd like to also say something too as far as being an ex-advocate. Petaluma does have a bottleneck because of the arrests, and that's the reason why it takes them so long to get a drug and alcohol evaluation done. So we was at a meeting before, and I questioned why the tribal employment assistance program don't go out there and start doing drug and alcohol evaluations also. Because, you know, we're all members of this tribe, and there should be a division between tribal workers and non-tribal workers. And so basically, you know, there again, they won't go out there. Okay, so Lisa, you have a wellness program. I'm wondering if she does, if her program can do drug and alcohol evaluations. In the law, it does state, you know, a person needs 90-day treatment program on their own. Okay, so a lot of people don't know how to do that. So they end up going to Petaluma. That isn't the only treatment center that's available. Because treatment programs usually paid by Medicaid, Medicare. So basically, when I was in there, I would get applications from different places. I sent a couple of people down to Omaha, and I think King Issue County down there. And I have to go to Omaha or out of state or down to Winnebago or someplace. So, you know, there's transportation provided right there. And they would go pick them up. But it's the idea we're not only restricted to Petaluma OTP. There's all these programs out there, but we have to put in an application. And a lot of people don't know how to fill out the application for it. And so basically, you know, this drug law that came about in 16, I think we should get a copy of it while this is going on, and we'll point out to you how faulty the drug law is, and maybe the change could start with these people to recommend the council. Because basically, you know, we had a judge here, and she got reamed in front of council. How come you're not making, convicting meth people, meth arrests? There was no laws in place. And so anyway, I stood up for the judge, you know, whenever you create laws, maybe it might start happening, you know, because people did need a check, you know, UA sample or draw the blood. And basically, so that was put in the law. And that's when these arrests start happening. But prior to that, there was nothing in place. And so basically, it needs to be revamped. And, you know, I kind of disagree with banishment of a person that's addicted, and we need to help them. But the person that's selling, you know, if they happen to get caught, and people don't realize this, a lot of it is federal offenses, and they'll be sent to prison anyway if found guilty. So we also need to do a campaign out there. You know, public safety needs to do a campaign. You know, if you're caught with meth, it's a possibility that you're going to be sentenced federally. It's kind of like a scare tactic. You know, if I sell meth, I thought, man, I don't want to lose my life to federal prison. So they need to get the campaign out in that sense. So I'm gonna try to get the drug law so we can possibly go over it.
Thank you for those. I think that they're really vital to the process that exists here, because evidently you guys went through the court cases and you guys see what changes that you would make a recommendation on improving the system, and then where that gap needs to be filled. And so before we proceed to more into the working part, I'd like to give the opportunity for Fabian and maybe the Chief of Police to kind of address some of your concerns to see whether or not, just to address your concerns.
Okay, I think it's important that if you're going to interact with Pekaluta, you have to look at the schedule. So we have a public schedule which shows some of the list of services. So it was mentioned that there's no follow-up services, and we do have that. Every year we look at how we can have greater access to services. The other thing is, I've been saying for a long time that the assessments at the jail are a problem. And so right now there's mainly one provider that is offering alcohol and drug assessments. And it's a skill that needs to be implemented by a social worker or a licensed or certified addiction counselor. And so not anybody can just create an alcohol and drug assessment. We do nearly 1,000 a year, and each assessment is a psychosocial on that individual. So it can be anywhere from 8 to 15 pages describing the situation within that person. So that is, there are a lot of assessments that are needed, and so that's an issue. It's an issue at the jail because we first went in to the jail when I became the director. Pekaluta never was in the jail, and so through our interdisciplinary work group, we agreed. And so somewhere along the line, Pekaluta became on the hook for 100% of the assessments at the jail. And so as a single provider, we have, it's a hard task to take up. So in addition to the jail, we also provide assessments at all 4 of our clinics and the JDC. And so as far as I'm aware, the other thing about the assessment is it's a voluntary process. So it doesn't matter whether the judge orders it. For us, it's a voluntary process. So the information is going to be as good as the client provides. So if a client comes in and they deny methamphetamine use and there's no collateral information, there's not going to be a methamphetamine diagnosis. That's just the bottom line of it. And so some clients will minimize, which is why when I communicate to the public, I try to encourage the family to come together, because the family can help make sure that the recommendation is as accurate as possible. Also, there are a number of reasons that would, or a number of factors that would affect the recommendation. Somebody may be a methamphetamine user and they get an outpatient recommendation, or they may get an inpatient recommendation. The factors could include whether they have an employee, whether or not they have children, whether or not they are willing to try outpatient. In most cases, you want to recommend outpatient before you recommend inpatient. The other myth is the fact that inpatient alone is going to be the remedy. It has to be inpatient in accompaniment with outpatient and recovery support services. So while an individual may not be in an inpatient program for months and months at a time, their length in service should be very long. And so we do not have cycles. We've done away with cycles several years ago. Matter of fact, that's one of the first things that I did as director, was I took away the cycles. So we're actually what's called client-based, not treatment center-based. So an individual's program is going to be based on that person. It's not going to be based on 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. It's based on that person. And so if they want to stay longer, they can. A lot of times people will realize they're not ready to go home at the end of their program. and we never make anybody just go home. If they want to stay, work on housing, work on other issues, they can. And so the reality is that we have a facility in Kyle that houses men, and a facility across the street that houses females. And so we try to keep those facilities at capacity. The other thing is, we don't really want community members worrying about whether, how we're going to place people. Because if Petaluma cannot place the individual in-house, we secure state placement. And if you look at all of the tribes in our region, Petaluma provides more state placement than the other tribes. We also utilize our regional drug dependency unit more than the other tribes. So our staff are doing a lot to place people in-house as well as in other places. But it's also kind of important to understand that we are dealing with an advanced alcohol and drug epidemic. And so our staff do the best that they can. And we need the HR policy to relax so we can get more people in, more professionals. And that's just the bottom line.
Quick question, Vivian. You say you work with the courts, correct? And all
Yes.
this. I guess 2 questions. How long have you been working with the courts with all these individuals, and how many would you say that you serve so far? I hate to put you on the spot like that, but just ballpark.
So we've been working with the court since I've been here, so nearly 5 years.
5 years.
We've been working with the AG's office, as well as the Department of Corrections to provide services. And so when I made my comments before about making sure that we have a system that is smooth for the clients, there are issues. So one of the issues that I'm aware of is when CPS, for example, refers individuals to a Petaluma, if they don't refer them with the documents that they're being charged with in terms of what has happened to the children, then we're going off of the client's word, right? So there's been times where the CPS has called me and said, well, how come this person got this particular recommendation? And I'll always review the case. And it's because we did not have the court charge or anything like that to as collateral information that would support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I hope that all that other information was useful for you, but I think a more specific question is, we know your services, we know your process and the relations you have with but their issue is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a lot of people that you advocate for that are basically needing these referral services and evaluations, and because they're not receiving that service in adequate time, that they're getting prosecuted and convicted for not applying themselves accordingly to that court order. And so I think the specific question is, how can we improve that service as far as your program? Is it more funding that is needed? Is it more positions? I think one of the things you mentioned was the HR process needs to improve to better, help you get more workers in a timely manner. So those are all, productive, active questions, and let's remember to bring those up a little bit later, because those are very good points. And I think just being specific and continuing to keep in mind that we have to be open-minded during this time, and asking all the questions for clarification purposes, and try to be specific and looking at what the actual problem is and how we can correct that. And so I'll let the Chief of Police kind of address some of your concerns towards his officers and better training your officers in the laws of which you guys have mentioned to him.
Training is always a component of the department, so we build all of our officers officers have mandatory 40-hour in-service training that we have to complete during the year. And we try to target those areas that are of most need. So, you know, part of that is absolutely drug training. How do they, you know, also working with the courts, the Attorney General's office, you know, getting to write better reports, getting them to identify different issues that they come across in terms of drugs. But, you know, just like the 30Jan up there and the program, you know, we can't jail ourselves on this problem. And when you talk about addiction, meth is only a small component of the addiction right now. Alcohol, I would say, still is the #1 issue that we have in terms of addictive behavior. We're dealing with meth because meth has more, I think, violent tendencies to a person that's on meth, that it creates more physical and health issues at a much rapid pace. And but as you can see from the data and statistics that we give out, you know, we made over 10,000 arrests. And out of that, only 728 dealt with actual drugs. And so there is a drug issue out there, but there also is an alcohol issue. And, you know, in these meetings that we go to monthly in dealing with this, one of the suggestions, some of the suggestions that we've talked about, I think from the law enforcement side and the court side, is an adequate probation office that can follow up with people that are put on probation. I think that the tribe needs to move immediately to some type of 24/7 program, similar to Peggy County, that if a person is put out on release, either pre-trial or after conviction and are on probation, that they should be subject to a 24/7 program where people are constantly checking that they're staying sober, that they're abiding by the conditions of their release. And I think the 24/7 program would help a lot of these individuals to stay in that area of staying off the drugs or alcohol. And so that, I think that's one component that would also help us in all working together. You know, law enforcement, you know, again, we do what we can to train our folks and to get them up to date on best practices in dealing with all these areas we're talking about. But, you know, there's more that we need to do in working with the communities directly, to work with the households, to work with other programs here in terms of educating our children about the effects of all of this. I know that the president kind of got upset at me because of the position I took as the chief, and one was the legalization of alcohol. And simply you look at White Clay, and White Clay shut down, and I agree 110% that White Clay should needed to be shut down because of the lawless community. People were getting killed and assaulted on a daily basis, and nobody was doing anything about it, so it needed to be shut down. But alcohol has been part of this reservation, you know, just when I've been around. And the prohibition simply has not worked. And you look at some of our surrounding reservations that have legalized it, they're able to put additional resources into treatment programs, into job creation programs, into other programs that can actually help improve people's lives. And, you know, this whole story of prohibition, you know, continue to enforce that. It's simply something we can't keep up with. We're constantly chasing drunk 24/7. Somebody calls in, somebody's drunk. We're spending all of our time picking up somebody for being intoxicated, being on the road, transporting them either to IHS for checks or to the hospital and stuff like that. if we had a better way of dealing with that, just the alcohol issue, to free us up to deal with some of the more serious issues in terms of the drug issues and stuff, and I think we'd be further ahead. If you legalize it, and I know a lot of our traditional people and all of us from a traditional standpoint say, well, alcohol's not good, this is what it's done to us, but, you know, simply, it's here. And there's no way that we can stop it because of the road that lead in here and stuff, and it's gonna continue to be here. The big thing that's happening now is you got these individuals that are doing these water bottles, filling this with anything, vodka, with sanitizer, with anything, $10 a shot. It's like, you know, somebody driving up in the car and say, oh, you want a water bottle? You know, give you $10 and now they don't even have to walk to the bootlegger anymore. So in our communities and stuff, and then what I stressed with the people last night in the communities, if you know who's doing that, we need that information. Those people are doing that, so we can go after them in terms of bootlegging, in terms of, you know, putting this harmful stuff in your water bottles, and that's really the effects, I think, in the more violent time, is that people are drinking harder type of alcohol than they are, what they normally traditionally drink, you know, years ago. So it's not only the drugs, it's also the alcohol. So, you know, the tribe, I know, is taking some steps. They're looking at the casinos and stuff as far as legalizing, but, you know, I think you gotta take a comprehensive approach. You know, if you're gonna approve alcohol, do it comprehensively. What are you gonna do with the resource, the sales, the taxation? Is all the resources come back into our programs to help our people, to help improve the life conditions? Because, you know, we only deal with one small symptom here. But there's many other issues that affect their family and the circles that they come from. There's lack of employment, lack of good places to live, in terms of homes and having 5 or 6 families live in one home. You know, how come we don't have more homes, more jobs for people? So it's a systemic issue that's affecting us across the reservation. But we got to improve that quality of life. Not only dealing with the alcoholism, drug abuse stuff, but overall the improvement of conditions that our people live in and opportunities for them. So, you know, just want to put that on the table. We'll continue to work with all of our counterparts, anybody within the tribe and the organizations and advocates and anybody involved in the criminal justice system. Anything that suggestions that you have back to the police department or public safety and how we can do a better job, we're open to that. Because you see it on a daily basis out there also, but people that you work with and programs that you work with. So the department's open to continuing to work with everybody involved, and we're committed to whatever comes out of this and to help put something together for a long-term solution for our time. I think it's something that's, I think you're doing a good job as far as documenting this stuff. And then something that comes out of this, that something concrete that could go to our legislatures and say, here's maybe the top 10 or 12 things that you can do as legislators to pass laws, to seek funding, to do things that's going to have an immediate impact on our community. And I think that's good. So I'll just leave it here with you.
All right, well, thank you for that. Go ahead.
I hate to keep overing on this meeting, but, you know, I suggested to Law and Order Committee, and I suggested to the clinical lab to do color-coded UAs. And basically, and this was probably about 4 years ago, and I went down there several times. We need these color-coded UAs going, because whenever the judge sentenced them to random UAs, that does no good. I had a niece who's addicted, and basically she was to do 2 UAs a week, so she'd go in there Friday night, she'd go in there Tuesday. So right after Friday night, she'd get high, and right after she did it on Tuesday, she got high again. Anyway, she's on stateside, but the fact is that our UAs need to be color-coded. Each district needs to be color-coded. So then that way, when you spin that wheel, you don't know if you're gonna do it the way that day or not. And I think that'll help keep people clean. And another thing that us advocates kind of had the judges do here was, Craven was our judge at that time, and we suggested to her, you know, people aren't reading enough around here, and they're not writing enough. Reading and writing is very important, so we suggested to her that she sentenced, when a guy sentenced to AOF, that she had him do a book report, read 3 books and do a book report. And the other thing that we did was we asked the judge to start sending them to GED classes. And when I was an advocate, we had one guy that graduated. Gene, has there been anyone else that has graduated from GED?
What's that?
Has there been anybody else that graduated from GED classes?
How many do we have graduated so far, Darwin?
Okay, that one guy, he was so happy, that happened to be my client. He was so happy that he graduated. And it led to him finding a job because he had the education. Another guy, you know, I asked the judge, I said, Judge, I know this is where this guy comes from. Let's have him do a history on his family. So he did. And you know what? That guy wrote 15 pages and he didn't know who his Gaka was. He found out, you know, that kind of helped him in life. So we kind of also have to look at other things that might help a person. Because, you know, all these things kept these people busy while he was in AOF. I think that was a great essential to them coming out from AOF as a different person. Lisa, I was going to ask you a question. Does your program do drug and alcohol evaluations?
No, our main goals are to help youth get back to the school, and we have what you call life maps, and where they can set goals, life goals, and maybe their goal might be to go to college, might be to just find a job, might be to just move to Rapid, but we'll work with them for up to 2 years on setting life goals. If that's included, it will help them set that up, but we don't do the assessment.
We were just talking about the bottleneck of not having drug and alcohol evaluations done at AOF. Basically, they didn't agree because, you know, lack of people that are employable in this program. And so sometimes people sit like 3 months for their drug and alcohol evaluation.
I know, I agree, there's not enough prevention specialists or people to do the assessment.
And then the judge too, they could, I see a lot of this where the judge will order a court-ordered alcohol drug assessment on each case. We have one girl, she's over there now, she's sitting there on 3 different cases, and each case she's sentenced to do alcohol drug eval. So does she have to do one for each case, you know? Because alcohol drug evaluations are good for what, 1 year?
Yes.
So if we got someone that's coming in and gets an alcohol drug assessment done, and then they relapse and come in again within that year, they're ordered to do another alcohol drug assessment when they already got one done. So we have a lot of prisoners over there that need an alcohol drug assessment, but they've already got one done for this year. But the judges want them done again. So it's kind of repetitive, and that's why we got so many that need an alcohol drug assessment. And I know there's times when Apetuluta get together, we'll send 8 to Altakaya, we'll send 8 to Pine Ridge, and some of the staff will come to the AOF to get their alcohol drug assessments done. And a lot of times too, sometimes the judges don't care for what was done. Like we had one, he did an alcohol drug assessment, and the recommendation was outpatient treatment. But that wasn't good enough, so then we had to go and do another one. So. And then there's times too that we have involuntary commitments. We had one that sat, she got her alcohol and drug done, she got her physical, and that's another thing when they have to go to treatment, they need a physical done, and the TB skin test. IHS only sees 1 or 2 a week for us. So that's another list plus the mental health, that's another list we have to get done. And so, there's times when we want behavioral health to come to the facility because they're at risk to escape. And so sometimes we'll call them and they'll come over. If we explain why we want them to come over, then they'll come and do the assessment there. But when this one person, she was in there, and the things weren't getting done fast enough for her compared to, according to her family. So we finally got her into treatment. We moved her from the female housing into treatment within the facility. The next day, the court sends over a dismissal, family withdrew.
Yeah.
So all that steps we had to take for that female, plus taking her to IHS to get her medication done and all this, was just out the door, you know? And it should be a law that once you put an involuntary commitment on your family members, that you can't withdraw. Because they'll call and they'll say, I'm not getting this, I'm really sick, I don't feel good. And then pretty soon the family comes and withdraws and then you're out the door. So it's kind of
a crisis again.
Yeah, so it's kind of you know, all this effort that we put towards this one person is just like down the drain because the family comes and withdraws after we got all this stuff done and finally got her in treatment.
I think Jane said that so much better than I did. Because the amount of work that it takes for one person to be placed, and as she just, accurately described, many times we get them placed and they don't show up. We're searching for the individual to try to take them to treatment, and they're no-show. So I think people may not realize how much work it takes for one person to get placed.
I just wanted to make a comment about the ICs. I agree completely with Jean, because we go through the same thing on the court side. You know, their families calling, they want to withdraw. And as of recent, I think this year, the chief judge and the AG were discussing the IC withdrawals, and the AG is going to put a notice out that maybe 2 times and that's it. But that has to come from his office, he's responsible for that. And then the stipulations that are put on the court order, like you mentioned, Jean, the alcohol and drug evaluations, all of those stipulations, those are referred by the AG's office, aren't they, Judge?
Those are the recommendations.
I'll let him talk about that.
Okay, well,
That's what they're talking about. I just walked in there talking about ICs and the conditions, right? All the.
So generally, when you have an involuntary commitment, depending on the strength of the case, excuse me, I'm still chewing on something. The client has to testify as to the content of the affidavit. The client is the person asking the court to grant the petition. And in those particular cases, the Attorney General's office or one of the prosecutors represent that individual. They put that person up on the stand, that person testifies to the content of the affidavit. Court makes a decision based as to the strength of that affidavit, whether or not the testimony is sufficient to grant a petition. If the testimony is insufficient and the defense or response can make a compelling argument as to why it should not be granted, that has to be given some weight. But if the evidence presented is overwhelming and there's proper documentation and the petition is granted, the court will then impose conditions on the respondent. Usually those are an alcohol and drug evaluation, probably a mental health evaluation. And then what happens is a review hearing will be set up after that as to a chance to review those recommendations from the evaluations. And at that point, the court will then set, you have like 30 days to complete your alcohol and drug evaluation to bring us proof. 30 days to bring us proof that you did the mental health evaluation. What were the recommendations of those evaluations, and how long is it going to take you to comply with those recommendations? And then at that point, it just becomes a review process, you know, whether or not it's 30, 60, 90 days in order to complete. Inpatient is one of those unknowns because you never know how long or how soon somebody is going to be placed in an inpatient facility, what the length of the program is, and whether or not that individual actually completes. Because before a person can go into an inpatient program, they're going to require a physical and a TB skin test because nobody is being admitted to inpatient without one of those. That's what that's saying. Any questions?
Okay,
One of the things we're not really looking at is how many repeat offenders do we have for the same charge that they get arrested for, possession, use, whatever. And like Gene said, there's a lot of time wasted on one individual that doesn't follow through with their required duties. So how much money is being spent and wasted on those duties? And one thing that I started looking at after we had that meeting out at OLC was the decriminalization that Seattle is doing regarding their drug charges, and it's saving the county almost $4 million a year since they've been doing it in 2017, which prompted my, how much money are we wasting saving? And one of the ways Seattle is decriminalizing it is if you get caught with a certain drug, you don't go to jail, you go to a three-member committee of a lawyer, a doctor, and a social worker, and from there they'll basically judge, jury, and executioner. They'll tell you, okay, you're going to jail for that possession, here's a minor fine of some money, or you're going to treatment, and it'll put a lot more weight on Fabian's shoulders out of Luta, but it worked so far for Seattle, and that's one thing that Mr. Eckerby talked about was changing the laws to better reflect and not really stress out the tribe, but to basically help them out. So we haven't really talked about that approach yet of maybe going through the social work aspect instead of sending them straight to AOF or to the courts where they just fall through the cracks, or they know the system or their family put them in there, but they're crying to their family to get them out, so they pull the hold and whatnot. So there's opportunities that other communities have done to combat their drug use problem that we can pick the spokes from their wheel and apply it to ours and see how it works out for us, because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here.
Okay, thank you for that.
Actually, I like to say that there's no money wasted on any people here because we're a grant-driven program, so then the more people that uses the service, the more they get funded.
That's not true either. Budget-wise, we're just, if we were funded for the amount of people that came through our court, we would have a $3 million, $4 million budget instead of our $1 million. And every year I submit my unmet needs, and I just shared that with Tyrell. I added to my contract every year, and it started at, when I started at like 400,000, and I think it's up to 900 and some thousand. We would need to fund. We would need for our probation department, for our public defender department, a special judge, peacemaking, child support, victim services coordinator, grant court resource coordinator, and a grants manager. So we would need all those positions to address the amount of people that come through the court. And that's another $1 million.
And as far as the wasting money comment, it's where AOF will send one employee, 2 employees to transport one prisoner to IHS for them to get all this work done, and then come back and then they don't comply, they get their lift holded, so they're out. So that was how many hours that could have been spent on another task, on another duty for those employees rather than transporting and waiting. Or with the police officer's job where they're tracking down this suspect or this hit when it's not true because whoever made that accusation don't like Tyrell or whatever. So it's not really wasting money, it's just not utilizing the people for more productive services.
Okay, so I think we could safely say that we identified 3 problems within those, with just that discussion alone. And so, in redirecting the focus here, that there's definitely, and it's evident that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in combating meth. It's not just saying, hey, we're gonna combat meth. It's the eternal process that has to be set up, and the laws to be able to support that. And some of them that were brought up that I wrote that is up for more discussion is there's the process that of the courts that needs to be communicated better. We talked about that referral process from CPS to ALO. We need a probation office. There was a concern for color-coded UAs pertaining to the court orders. All these different things. So if you look at all of that, that has to do with the law and order process that needs to be set up there. We also have the community wellness component and that's kind of where Fabian's program it can be used in both capacities. A part of the process that would need improvements because of the court that comes and orders the individual to go and do their evaluations, and it's not getting done in a timely manner, then they get charged. So then that's an issue. That's a problem as well. But at the same time, they also provide community wellness in the communities. So I gave you all, those of you that I seen didn't have something to write on. I gave you guys a tablet and a pen, and these are some of the questions that we're going to get down to specifics. And if you guys can, just kind of jot down some of your thoughts and ideas around meth. And we'll start from making our assessment of meth, and then as soon as that we're done with that, we'll go into the capacity building. So that way we're kind of continuing to stay on the same page, but we're going to also make those developments accordingly. So we all have the tasks that we're going to be able to do and communicate about what our capabilities are and continue to stay focused. But at the same time, we want to keep in mind, I want to give you guys a friendly reminder about the agenda that we have here. And it's a lot of good discussion that was being talked about. I put on the bottom of the agenda here, this plan will value, respect, and accept the differences of all people in our communities. So with that being said, we want to continue to be open-minded about this whole process, and everybody has the right to contribute, and we welcome those. So in talking about the assessment, part of a strategic prevention framework, we have to ask ourselves these 5 questions here. And according to assessment, it involves the collection of data to define problems and mobilizing key stakeholders to collect the data and implement prevention strategies. Part of this mobilization may be the development of an epidemiological work group that has the ability to spearhead the data collection process. This work group may then be responsible for defining the problems and underlining factors that will need to be addressed during the implementation step. Assessing resources includes assessing cultural competence, identifying service gaps, and identifying the existing prevention infrastructure in the community. So step 1 also involves the assessment of readiness and leadership to implement policies, programs, and practices. So with that being said, we talked a little bit about cultural competency, about bringing together all the spiritual leaders to provide their assistance as well. The next step is to identify service gaps. And as I'm reading this, feel free to jot down your ideas as we're give a few minutes, and then you guys just start throwing your ideas out there. I'm gonna actually type it, and then that way it'll be recorded, so all of this will contribute to the overall plan. So in asking yourself these questions, just write down on your tablets there, what is the greatest substance abuse problem, and what do you know about why it is happening? So if we think about the substance abuse problem, our main focus for this working session today is just for meth. Now, we want to be mindful to all of the other drugs and alcohol that exist on our reservation. Those are problematic. They've been here for generations, but right now we want to focus on meth. And so, what do you know about why this is happening? We can throw some ideas out there about the poverty that may exist here. Is it because of unhealthy relationships? You know, what are some of the ideas that you think why people are using this meth more than usual? And it's actually increasing over the past 3 years from, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ekafi, 3,000 to about 10,000 people now. And then where is this problem taking place? What communities do you come from? Where did you hear about, an event that happened within the reservation? And what group of people is it affecting the most? What do we know? What does our data say? Does anybody know? Is it affecting our children more? Is our preschool children? Is it affecting our elementary students more than our high school students? Is it affecting more children that that don't go to school? What is is it affecting our elderly? How many elderly got evicted from their homes? Is it 100 that got evicted? What is that? How does that look? Or is it affecting more of our adult ages from 18 to 40? Just throw an idea out there of who do you think the problem is affecting the most? And the reason why they ask this is that way we can be able to identify what resources we have and what specifics that our programs are able to do in providing prevention services and things like that, treatments, and in the different age groups. How can we deal with the problem and bring about a change? Geez, that seems like it's just right there and it's easy. Let's put on one sentence and say, this is what we're gonna do to change meth. It's a complicated thing, but if we are able to coordinate this in a way where it's more strategically, we really need to think about that question, or what does that mean? How can we deal with this problem, this meth epidemic, and how can we bring about that change? And is it going to be a positive change? What is the impact it's going to affect in our communities? Go ahead.
I think the problem with meth is cost and availability. It's relatively cheap to get and it's easy to make. And in an economically depressed area like the reservation, you have somebody who has half a mind as to chemical compositions and how to cook it. It's right there. It's made of products you can go to the store and buy and then put them all together. And if you don't blow up your house or burn it down when you're making it, you start to see the wind blowing.
All right, thank you for that.
Another thing is the glamorization of it.
Glamorization? Where
People see their friends selling it, hooking up with people that do sell it and getting this money, getting these new toys, new phones, new things, and they want that too. And part of the problem is the economic situation we're in across the reservation. So when I see Tyrell selling meth, and he's getting all these fancy things, new toys. His girlfriend's getting fancy things, new toys. His kids are getting fancy things, new toys. And me and my girlfriend, my kids don't have that, so I'll jump into that same realm. And hopefully I can start getting fancy things and new toys as well.
Then you got the ones that are addicted. I have one of my friends went to prison for selling dope. And so when she got out, I went to go see her and I said, what happened? I said, when we were friends, we hung out. I said, we never did do drugs. And she said, well, she said, first I started into coke. She got addicted to coke. And then from coke, she went to meth, because meth was cheaper. And so to support her habit, she became a dealer as well. And then she got caught and went to prison. And she said when she went to prison, that was the best thing that ever happened to her. Because when she was in prison, it helped her sober up. She went to treatment. And so now she's doing good, living in Africa, got a job and all that. So that's a lot of, that's how they get into, and they always say marijuana is a gateway drug. I mean, it could be any drug. It could be alcohol. I'm seeing a lot of, I've been working corrections for 30 years now. I'm seeing a lot of the ones that used to just come in drunk. Now they're coming in high on meth. It's like they traded their alcohol, their drink, for meth. So instead of being alcoholics, now they're on meth. And that's how a lot of them support their habits, is to deal meth to support their habit. And then a lot of these big time drug dealers, they know that. So they know who to contact and who to supply them with money so that they can get high as well.
So I'm just talking purely from a provider's standpoint, not administrator, but to answer all of your questions, and this, I'm working with these folks day in and day out. Talk about the dealers and the users. A lot of times those are the same people, they're not different. You explain. A lot of the dealers are users as well. And a lot of them are not throwaway people or people that are bad, but they have a disease called addiction. It's a disease. World Health Organization, American Medical Association, every major medical establishment on the planet defines this as a disease. It is a disease. We have to keep that clear. But what is the greatest problem? What we're finding, the science is telling us, social science, studies out there, empirical data is telling us that addiction is rooted in trauma. That's the root cause. So when you're addressing addiction without addressing the root cause, it's like putting a Band-Aid on it. It's not gonna heal. You have to understand that mental health has to run concurrently with addiction counseling. Okay? And we have two agencies here on the reservation. We have, I'm not saying Betdaloo's is the only agency, but we have the addiction side of things because the Tribe 638 is a program. Then you have Indian Health Service on the other side, who is the behavioral mental health component. These two, they're not talking. Okay? There's this big disconnect. So what we find is that with our users and the people that we serve, our clients, we're going to find that if we don't address the mental health, which is the traumas, neglect, abuse, abandonment, what have you, they're all rooted in trauma. If we don't address that, the chances of them recovery is a big lose rate. Okay, that's what the data is telling us. Okay, we're not exempt from that. Where's this problem taking place? And a lot of this is anecdotal, just from working. Every day it's everywhere. They come from every district. We're pulling a lot of our people in from Rapid City. So the belief that as soon as they go to Rapid City, everything's better, that's not the case. What we find with IHS, you guys look at the IHS reports that they put out. They put one out every year. The latest one they put out is in 2017. On and off reservation use is almost a mirror of each other. There's no difference. There really isn't. So they're here or there. It's the same thing. It's just called displacement geography. You move the problem from here to Rapid City back to here. As you know, our people are very transient in nature. That's a population characteristic. The ones that we're finding the biggest youth is our younger people, the ones that are coming in. So we see a lot of our clients in their 20s and 30s that are coming into our facility. They've been using it since they were 13, 15 years old. That's pretty common. So early use, so the abuse of drugs and alcohol is happening probably in their teens. That's probably where a majority of it, the impact is having. By the time they get to their 20s and 30s, even 40s, they've been using for a long time. So there's a couple of things. We went to American Health Professionals Association in Philadelphia this past year, and their motto was a pound of prevention equals a ton of keywords.
Prevention is a pound of cure.
Yeah, but the reality is, for public policy standpoint, this, if you look at this from a tribal government perspective, the studies tell us for every $1 you put into rehabilitation, it nets society $7. So there's a 700% return on our investment for that. It's good public policy to put into rehabilitation as to put into jail, courts, because what we find is extrinsic outcomes are the worst things. Reward and punishment have been demonstrated to be the absolute worst way to change human behavior. So prevention and a rehabilitation should be the preferred method. I'm not saying that in every instance that should be the case, but you had spoken about that, sir, at the last thing, and you were very elegantly put that in a very good way, that we can't jail our way out of this problem. And then, but the last thing is, is our community ready for us? And that's a real open-ended question. Yes and no. It's a lot more complex. We know there's a problem, but there's two reasons why people never don't act. One is they don't know how, or two is they're overwhelmed. Those are the two reasons why people are there's no action that are done. So from a, just as a provider, as a people that see these folks day in and day out, they're not bad people, but the issue is a lot more complex than just changing. We have to address poverty. These folks are, you know, you say they should go to college, they should do this, they should do that. What we're finding with a lot of our population characteristics is a lot of our clients that come in that are on drugs and alcohol, they have biological disorders. As you know, we've had a very high fetal alcohol spectrum disorder issue with American Indian population. Well, those children grow up. We're not tracking those people who have these disorders at childhood and they grow up. So a lot of them have lower cognitive functionality issues. They have more substantial behavioral issues, and we're expecting these people to succeed. We're expecting these people to live as normal people when one is they don't have the ability to. Okay, a lot of them don't have GEDs. They have no education because they fell through the cracks of the education system. So this issue is not just about drugs. It's far more complex than that. There's a lot of variables that go into why people are on methamphetamines or why they're on alcohol. And we have to look at this from you talking about epistemological standpoint. That's a good way to do it. But the variables that go into this problem are a lot more complex than just somebody's on drugs because they got stuck on drugs. A lot of them have, again, biological disorders. A lot of them have mental health disorders, cognitive disorders, genetic disorders, things that compound them to not be able to function in society. And then what we find is those folks are kind of generally have very high rates of addiction, so they kind of are in the penal system or in the drug and alcohol treatment system. And we are the catch-all for a lot of these folks. So this is all I'm saying. This issue is far more complicated than just one thing, two things, three things. There's a lot of moving parts. It's like a Swiss watch. You take the back off, there's things moving. The variables and the complexities so the best thing is rehabilitation. But that doesn't mean just drug and alcohol rehabilitation, education. You have to give them some kind of job training, I mean, the inputs that have to go into this. And I'm sorry for throwing a wrench into everything, but this is what we see from working with these folks every day. This is the reality of trying to help them. These are the most vulnerable of our people. And the help that they're going to need in order to rehabilitate them to make productive members of society is going to be very complex, but it's going to take a lot of effort from a lot of different people, a lot of different programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add to that? And just go ahead and
Okay, so I went down there and I got 1622. This is section 546, prohibited acts, simple possession and ingestion. Okay, so I have this in my hand right here. I just now ingested some. Do you guys see the difference? These two laws should not be mixed together. but yet they are, because one is basically gonna be addicted, the one that ingested it, whereas the one that has it in his possession might be the seller. And so basically, what the law says is a violation of this section shall be punishable by a fine up to $5,000 or a term of imprisonment in the tribal jail not to exceed 12 months or both. So basically, if I went to a 90-day treatment program at my expense, this charge could be dismissed after I completed the stipulations. So when the judge orders something, that's when AOF comes in handy, because they have to transport people to mental health. That's when you guys come in handy, because you have to do the drug and alcohol evaluation, and the person has to file a recommendation. But basically, the point that I'm getting at is, if we really want to get somewhere, we need to start reviewing these laws and changing them. Because if I have simple possession, I'm gonna try to sell. I'm not gonna hang on to it. So there you go.
Go ahead.
I really like what he said. And the thing is that, how do we deal with the problem? And he said, we either don't know how to do it or we're overwhelmed. And I guess for me that it's both, because I have a job, I have 5 kids at home, and I'm just overwhelmed. And I don't have the time, even sitting here is kind of taking from my work. And that really needs to be done, really needs attention, but I'm sitting here because I really am concerned about this. So what I've done is I do a lot of individual work, I don't work in groups. And I work for the tribe in the shelter, emergency youth shelter, and we provide shelter for kids 12 to 17. The kids we get all come from CPS. They're usually taken from their homes because their parents were picked up for something, having a party or something like that. But the parents are usually addicted. They come from really poor homes. And they come with no clothes. They come with bad teeth. They come with lack of education. And they probably sleep on the floor at home. But when they come, they don't appreciate that they have a nice bed with clean sheets and a meal right on time, a healthy meal. They really don't appreciate that. They'd rather be home with sleeping on the floor with their parents because they love their parents. And it's the only life they know. But that's what we have to work with. And so we work with those kids, we have to talk to them individually, we talk to them, and then we got a SAMHSA grant. And we hired a social worker, and we work with them individually, a lot of counseling. We're doing follow-up with them, with their families. We're trying to do a lot more with their families so that the unification is better, because we can't pull that family out of poverty. All we can do is talk and work with what they have. And these kids, when they come to us, we have to be very careful about being judgmental, like you should be doing this and you should be this way. We have to be very careful with to accept them the way they are and where they came from, and we have to work with them. So, I don't know, I guess it's overwhelming. We hear horror stories that a little 14-year-old shouldn't go through, but does. So, I work individually. My husband and I have adopted 7 kids, and they all came from those types of families. They came from here on the reservation. We have 2 rosebuds. And we work with them individually too. And we live about 4 miles out of town. We don't let them come into town. We don't let them get on Facebook. We have rules. And we talk with them and work with them. So That's how I do it. I mean, if you want, I'd be very interested in being in a group, but I wouldn't know how to lead a group or what to do. I just do what I can and do. And where I work.
Okay, thank you for that. I think, I mean, you know, just even talking about that healthy discussions, one of the main things that I got that you say was overwhelming, but at the same time you shared a personal experience, and that goes back to parenting. So I think that, and that's something we kind of briefly covered what parenting is, that talking about going, the teaching is going back in the home, setting that foundation for the children's lives. So community awareness, you know, and so that's what that would, I would say, would go back to. Does anybody have anything else they want to add to the assessment?
We had a parent, we had a kid in there. The mother and father came to visit him, and she sat down and said, "This place is so nice, it's just homey." And she sat down and then she cried. She said, "I wish I had a home like this." So sad.
You guys just walked in, welcome. This afternoon, we're kind of just talking about our working session. And then this is, we're in the assessment stage of it. We're just kind of talking about these 5 areas here. If you guys want to, you can feel free to contribute to that. If not, we're going to review kind of what we have here and then move on to the next one, the next piece of it. So what I got from, as far as the assessment, what is the greatest substance abuse problem, and what do you know about why it is happening? So according to this group here, basically just one person said the dealers are the same people doing it. World Health Organization identified addiction as rooted trauma. Mental health has to run concurrently with trauma. Where is the problem taking place? ALO treatment cannot provide adequate services because of the number of evaluations that need to be completed per order of the court. It is cheap, anyone can buy the ingredients, the glamorization of it. People are addicted to it, and then to support it, they become a dealer. Everywhere from every district. A lot are from Rapid City. Younger people in their 20s and 30s are using. They've been using these drugs since their teens, about the age of 13. What group of people is the problem affecting the most? We haven't really went over that. I guess just from what I said about the, somebody mentioned about the 20s and 30s. And then, how can we deal with this problem and bring about change? The thing that I got from ALO is to change human behavior is rehab and address poverty. And we gotta ask ourselves exactly, how do we do this though? How do we change poverty? So that's another question we can start to think about. Understanding that this is a variable, it is far more complicated than just drugs here. We don't know how to do it, and we are overwhelmed. And then also, we can deal with the problem through parenting. Is our community ready to do something about it? Somebody said yes and no. To provide job placement and trying to help them, review laws and try to change it. So the next piece of it would be capacity building.
Can I say something? That number, that how can we deal with it? And he talked a lot about the mental health issue. And I think in prevention, we can start on the mental health. There are schools implementing mental health programs as early as 4th grade, 4th and 5th grade. And I think that's a good idea, because there are different kinds of mental health programs that can work. I just saw on TV the other day about this one program, it's in Colorado. And these, I think they're fifth graders, they have watches on. And during the day, and somehow that watch measures something, their blood rate or their heart rate or something. But it turns different colors to tell what your mood is. And when it gets red, that's when you're ready to burst with anger. And then they teach them how to deal with it, like different kids will count to 10, or one will leave the room or the situation or the environment, but they have different ways to deal with it. And then they can talk with their teacher afterwards when they start to feel better and when it starts to go to a different color. I thought that was a good idea.
I don't want to be negative, but it has on it, is our community ready to do something about it? I don't think we're ready to do something about it. Because if this law just come out in 2016, and that has been around here at least 10 years before that. And basically, lack of people providing services also. I sat into a courtroom of kids, juvenile kids. That was from Kyle. They all tested positive for weed and meth. There was nothing that we could do except for put them on probation. And so no, we're not ready to deal with this. We need more grants written to hire people to effectively do their jobs.
My granddaughter got arrested. She was 7th grade and got caught smoking weed with a bunch of kids up at High School. And she had come to court and they just laid it on her. And it was pretty good. She just took it serious. But she had to get an evaluation. She had to do community service. And she had to get a drug and alcohol evaluation. And they recommended that she attend these classes and refrain from use and all this stuff, and she took it pretty serious. And she's going to her classes. They have youth classes on Monday nights at on Peacemaking in Heinrich. I thought she took it pretty serious. I don't know what it was.
Dakota? Can we go back up to Jean's concern? She had a high number of evals that need to do. 88 people are waiting. So Fabian and the AG and other programs have gone to meetings with Ramon on his substance abuse disorder. And that's the same problem we have. We need resources from the tribe. That's an unmet resource. We don't have anybody to do evaluations. Fabian's program does that. They go to jail. And then we have Catholic services. And I believe EAP Alice at her program can do some of them.
ESST. The Behavioral Management Systems and Services at Outstrings.
Oh, another vendor?
So there's at least 3 other providers that can do that. We're not doing a good job because they come to be Catholic Social Services and BMS, and we'd like to help you guys use some of that. But we're not really getting those referred to them yet.
We went in Catholic Services, I think the month of July, we let them use one of our consultation rooms. But the point is, Dakota, we need resources, AG can recommend them, recommend what's needed, judge can order it, but we're limited. And we talked in the same group with Ramon, we talked about a tribal resource visit. Of all the tribal programs, we have a resource that could help. And I think that kind of needs to be looked at here also.
On that note, Betty, Pekaluta has been offering contracts to those those rapid city providers. And so we were successfully able to get a contract with Martin Addiction Recovery. So they're going to be doing so many. Of course, that was submitted in December, and we still don't have a purchase order for that yet. So some of the red tape that we have to go through is kind of lengthy. But Catholic Social Services was offered, BMS was offered, Lutheran Social Services. So if you guys in your dealings with the other addiction providers can convince those folks, Petaluma has resources where we could contract them to provide assessments for the jail. That's kind of, I mean, honestly, that's where I think that's the solution, really, than to have our staff dedicated. I think it would be a lot easier to contract those services out for the short term anyway.
Gene, when you guys have vets come through, do you contact the VA for their services for substance abuse?
No, we don't.
I think that's a problem too, is I think that, because the VA from Hot Springs approached me saying, do you guys really have any mechanism to identify people as veterans when they come through the process? Ideally, that would be something you ask, a probation officer would ask them.
Yeah.
An intake.
Yeah.
But they don't really have that, so it's, I mean, it either has to come from us asking them at court maybe when they're going through their plea, or maybe as part of the booking process too. Those are the two opportunities you will have to.
And there's also that mechanism of the VA don't have to look yet.
Yeah.
Any vet in jail, the VA won't offer any form of assistance to them.
Why is that?
I don't know.
You know, we called Hot Springs up over there and told them we got some vets that need anger management, etc. PTSD stuff, even health care treatment and medications. And they said, while they're incarcerated as an inmate, then we cannot offer them any services. So I don't know the answer.
So can you answer any of those?
So, yes. So, good afternoon, John Ritter, Veteran Services. For those of you who don't know me, one thing that I've spoken to VA about in detail was about getting veterans who are incarcerated some sort of services. Now, we have discussed possibly establishing an MOU to get veterans who are incarcerated. Some of the services and the way that could possibly work is because they're not federally charged, they're not technically in the state system, they can receive those services, but that's something that we would have to, as a group, come together and agree on. And the director of VA healthcare, or Black Hills Healthcare System, she is more than willing to sit down at the table with us and do those things and hash out all those details. And maybe if we could incorporate asking during the booking process if they are a veteran, then in turn, I could be contacted as a veteran service representative and come and do, a questionnaire with them and then see exactly what they need as far as any type of services that they would receive from the VA and, create a referral process and get that kind of streamlined if that's something we could all agree and sit down and meet with. But other than that, it's never really been talked about.
That would be something after the veteran is adjudicated and after the judge makes the order, because he might order him to treatment or do a drug and alcohol evaluation, and that's the time when you can step in and request to transport him up to Hot Springs to have a drug and alcohol evaluation.
And that's something that I can do. It was just approved in my budget for extra funding to go ahead and transport veterans to the VA Medical Center, so something like that can be established and we can go ahead and get that done. But again, it's getting those key people to attend a meeting that could possibly benefit veterans. Because then it could take a lot of the resources that are focused on these groups of people, and you can kind of outsource and get like veterans more streamlined, I guess is probably the best word I can use. And that way it leaves more services or resources for those who aren't veterans to get those services, and takes that focus off of them, and that way we can kind of help each other out in that way.
Okay, thank you for that. So this is definitely going in a good direction, because that's exactly what this first part of it is identifying all of our problems. It's not just about the substance abuse part of it, but any problem that is in regards to the meth, And so we've added some of this stuff now that you guys have been talking about. The probation office, VA doesn't allow for services for veterans when they're incarcerated. And we added, how can we deal with the problem and bring about change? We need drug classes, support systems, more resources to provide evaluations. AO has been giving contracts out to provide evaluations, establish an MOU with the VA and the OST. If veterans aren't federally charged, they can receive any type of services that they are referred for.
Can you add in there, based on their characterization of service? Because every veteran who is discharged, outside of honorable or general under honorable conditions, which would mean other than honorable discharge, or bad conduct, or dishonorable, aren't eligible to receive services regardless incarceration or not. That's just how that works.
Then is our community ready to do something about it? We've added that we need mental health programs. I don't think we're ready to do something about it. Somebody else mentioned we need more people to write for grants to effectively do their jobs, getting the key people to attend working sessions. So I think we got about just, we got a lot of good stuff here to work towards so far.
Can I add one more to that? AOF is in dire need of a behavioral unit out there within itself, because they're the ones that's incarcerating people that are higher on meth, and those people that have a behavioral health specialist will be able to identify it more quickly. And basically, the council was just talking about putting a nurse out to AOF, so I suggested, a behavioral health unit also, because the vets have one, Rapid City has one.
And that's specifically for vets?
No, it's for anybody at AOF.
Oh, at AOF, okay, that's what
The majority are there for meth. Anyway. Can I add a comment too?
Yeah.
We're talking about if our community is ready. I'd like to add real quick, stay Rob, you're my best friend. I gotta go. Stay and cheer me on in case I need back. No, the other thing that I'd like to add is if our community, we need to maybe form some kind of a different type of an agreement. DPS takes children away for specific reasons. They already have the protocol, it's established. But I think we need to develop something a little more intense for us, since we're talking about meth and stating that, if you are on meth and you do come forward, sure that we take it in place, but we need to give this assurance that when the treatment plan is done, whether it's a year later, that the children come back. They don't have to worry about, I have to go through all the government red tape to court and showing the courts I did this and complied and probation and before I get my kids back. I think we need to develop a different route so that somebody on that will know that when I'm done, finally done, I can get my kids back without going through months and months of red tape to get them back and keep that family intact. I think that'll help also because the kids are also affected. But the other part of community is IHS. If a meth treatment plan is done, there's going to be certain medications that will be prescribed. I'm sure there's got to be some kind of meds. We need to make sure that these types of medication are accessible through IHS. A few years back, we all tried to get on board for Vivitrol. Remember that? We got drugged through the ringer and everything else. All because we wanted to address the issue of alcoholism. And come to find out, IHS don't. If I remember, they don't have Vivitrol to administer. So make sure IHS has these meds for treatment.
So on that note, Part2 has secured funding for the detox as well as the medication-assisted treatment medication. But we cannot secure IHS's support for our physicians. So 5 years ago, maybe not that long ago, maybe 3 years ago, we met with the chief for the acting CEO, Sophia Connery, we developed a she developed responsibilities of the tribe as well as IHS. She was very specific in the fact that they weren't going to provide nurses and doctors. She said, you need to secure that. And we did, but their end of the bargain was that they would actually provide the support for those, so like honoring our physician scripts. Well, that's not happened yet, and so we're still trying to communicate with them. We've drafted an MOU. There's some interest in making that MOU more comprehensive. But that's still in place, so we really need their commitment to, as Medgar was saying, to really be integrated. The behavioral health, hospital services, and in fact, really have to be one in order for it to really be sustainable.
And I agree with that note because of the fact that when you think about this whole process, it is a process when, when somebody's on meth and then you have received that training that say they need to detox for 1 year, and so maybe that's the problem is, one of the problems is that they're not detoxing adequately, so therefore they're not getting the treatment that they need. Because you shouldn't even bother with somebody that if you're not gonna go 6 months and then they relapse and then you get repeat offenders and so on. But if there's a certain program that's developed specifically with different entities such as yours, and you say IHS and even the whole court system like this, if they're to detox for 1 year, say they have to be incarcerated, and maybe this could be a law, they're part of their treatment plan, And this is the question comes up, like, okay, before banishment, let's try this extensive treatment plan first before we banish them for 1 year or whatever. And then talking about disenrolling, because those two will be different. But say we go for 1 year to just detox, they're incarcerated for 1 year. After their 1 year, they're gonna go into this treatment facility, and then they're gonna get all the treatment to regain their mental capacity for 6 months. And then they begin to, say they had a family of 3 kids, then they wanted to get them back, then they had to follow through with this without any relapse. And so if they relapse, then they could try it again, just one time. Or maybe it's gonna be where they did meet that criteria, they got up to a year, they're up to the second stage of the treatment plan, and that's the 6 months of inpatient care out at his facility. And then after that, they could, the next year they could start doing home visits and then getting back involved in the child's life once a month. And after 6 months, it'll be every weekend, and slowly regaining and building that relationship again. And then, so it's gonna take about an easy 2 to 3 years for this treatment, extensive treatment plan. But if they say that, you were talking about sciences, what does science say about all this? Is there brain development and then creating that dopamine and things like that? Those questions need to be asked and answered, who can answer them? How long does it take before that happens, And if they do develop this 1 year of detox and this treatment plan, where is their brain development going to be after that? Are they going to be able to have emotions again, to be able to care for their children? So it's evident that, that this, incarcerating them, prosecuting and convicting them, and they can go in jail for 30 days isn't enough. Is that what science says? No, it's not, because they need to detox for 1 year before they can adequately go through that treatment process and become well in their recovery stages to even, get custody back of their children. So we need to strategically kind of look at those different avenues and then really look at this extensive treatment plan and what needs to be applied to that process, So just thinking about some of those kinds of questions in regards to what you were saying, right now, whatever is in place, evidently, and we can all agree, isn't working. So, we need to develop a better treatment plan. before even, I think, going to the next step of just banishing them. Because going back on, I think what you were saying, and I totally agree with you too, we're not getting rid of this problem by sending them to jail over and over again, and we're not gonna get rid of the problem by just banishing them. You know, that's just turning away from the problem and not dealing with it. And we always teach even our children and our relatives not to do that. You know, to confront everything that we have and to be able to deal with that in a healthy way and then to move on. So in acting accordingly to that, I think that we do need to look at a treatment plan before the banishment, you know, because we can't, that's like giving up on our family and our relatives when this is clearly, and this is referenced from ALO, that it's a disease, and diseases are treatable, you know. And so I think we need to look at this as the victim here can be looked at as the user, you know, but the manufacturer, the distributor can be looked at in a different way. But the user is probably the victim, and that's the person that we want to get help for, you know. Considering the environment that our people live in, automatically is set up for failure, you know. All of us know that. How many of us don't know that? You know, we have poverty that exists here, all these pre-existing conditions, the harsh realities of this reservation, the peer pressure, the lack of family foundations, you know, the dropout rates, the health disparities. I mean, just a child being here and living here on this reservation, they have to overcome so many challenges to try to live an adequate, quality, good life. And then to be able to just go to look at them and to say, hey, we're just going to banish you when you get older, you start doing drugs, you know. No, we need to look at this now when they're children and come up with a creative way to where it's actually, we're instilling those good teachings at a preschool level, you know, and then to build up to the capacity to say, you know, as you get older, we want them to be the counselors, we want them to be the teachers, you know, we want them to be the AG and the court system administrators, you know, we want them to be in all these capacities where it's more realistic. So they have a hope, they have a dream, and putting that into action and actually, and then being able to develop that plan for them. So I think, and with that saying too, Lisa Schrader provides assistance to our young people to establish life goals for them, you know, so I think that's also very important. But you see how all of this all intertwines, you know, and so a lot of this right here that we're talking about, it has to deal with a lot of our law and order committees and setting up that system of care. And so it begins with the foundation of it is the user. And the user is going to be either charged, prosecuted, and convicted. But what happens at that point? You know, when they have to leave from being incarcerated, what's the next step? And evidently it's where they get assessed and evaluated. But again, that goes back on what Fabian has been saying. And it's client-based, so what they tell him, you know. And so if you kind of look at that and just being open-minded about that, you know, and we may know somebody that may say, hey, you know what, I haven't did drugs and alcohol for 30 days now, you know, and that was probably a lie. You know, so we probably need to look at that a little bit more better, see how we can approach that so we're able to really give an analysis to that individual and their treatment plan. Again, they also right now have to be willing and open to getting themselves treatment, but that's not happening either. You know, they're not just going to walk in somewhere and say, hey, you know, today I'm going to quit and I need to go get help for it. That's not realistic in most cases because, first of all, again, they lack their brain lacks the ability to process that dopamine, so they're not able to even feel that emotion should they want it to, you know. So is that where law comes into place to say, hey, you know what, if you want treatment and there's a red flag and it's just meth, you know, maybe it is this expensive, or maybe we're putting it out there where we're saying, okay, those of you that want treatment, here's this extensive treatment plan, you gotta go through. I don't know, these are just, it's all good stuff you guys are saying, and I'm just bottling it all up, and then, kind of giving you guys reports of everything we're talking about here.
And I think too, when it comes to coming to jail, if you're addicted, no matter if you're addicted to alcohol or meth or whatever, when you're in jail, all you think about is getting that next fix. Whether it's going to IHS and faking a pain, so that you get a pain pill. Most of the time it's what is it called? Ibuprofen. So a lot of them that are addicted to meth, when they're in jail, they go to IHS, they get on ibuprofen, they crush it, snort it. That's their next fix. That's their high while they're in jail. And when we don't take them to IHS, they got family members coming to the judge and saying they won't take me to IHS. So we get a court order, transport to IHS. So that's what we're having problems with. And so I think when they come to jail and they're addicted to drugs, then we take them to IHS on a daily basis. We're seeing a lot of rotten teeth, so they're going to dentists. A lot of transports, and that's what ties up. I got my correction officers at the AOF. Sometimes they get overwhelmed because there's only 5 of them on per shift, and then it takes a lot to transport because they're transporting here to the courts, to the AG's office, to IHS. Sometimes there's only one officer watching 100 and some prisoners because all the other officers out transporting. And so that's what we're having problems with, because we're, enablers. They go from one addiction, when they come to jail, they go to another addiction. So that's what we have to look at.
I also wanted to talk about the expectations of treatment. Some of these issues, the first institution, social institution, is the family, right? So that's the first teachers. And so this is a family, it's a family disease. So I think as programs we can do all we can do, but unless the TOSHWAs and TYs come together and say we're going to take control of this, there's going to be limited success. But in terms of understanding the expectations of treatment, and when people get a specific recommendation and not being happy with the recommendation, not really understanding that is a negotiation between the counselor and the client. And so, if you were to ask me, if somebody didn't do anything else, would you prefer to go to residential treatment or outpatient? It's really actually outpatient. Because a lot of times with inpatient, you don't need a whole lot of time there, right? The purpose is to stop the cycle. And it's also to take somebody away from that drug. So some of the literature has indicated that when you take someone and you put them in this isolated environment, of course the family's happy. If I was the dad, I would be happy. The client feels better, but it may not provide them all of the tools that they're going to need to combat the addiction. Because in this world, the drug of choice is always going to be an arm's length away. That's just the reality of it. So treatment so residential treatment is to keep them away from it and break the cycle. Once that's happened, then they have to continue with like an outpatient program, other services. So Dakota, when you say a year, they should be in service for a year. There's that period of time where they're foggy. If you take a meth client and you try to put them into a group right away, no, they're not gonna be too successful. They're gonna be tired and still in a fog. But after that fog clears, they need to be in service for as long as possible. That doesn't mean that they need to be inpatient for as long as possible, but they need to be in service for as long as possible. And certainly, the probation officers will be an amazing component because they're going to be making sure that they comply with each phase. But it also has to be the family too. We ask the question, who do we see as being the most successful? One thing that we don't talk about is there are people that recover from all these drugs right there on the reservation. People that go through the program, people that probably go through other programs. Maybe some people quit without having to go through a program, but people do recover. And of course, we can only speak to the people that come from Petaluma, but the ones that we see recovering have the family support. They come in as a group, and the family is concerned about what's happening. They show up to the family meeting when Michael offers it. And then afterwards, they're right there with their relative trying to make sure that they're following the compliance. The other people that we see that are successful, sometimes they have to go a couple of times. They come to treatment the first time, and they're still hanging on to things when they leave. They still think, well, I could still hang on to that one friend, or I could still do this one thing, and then they find out, no, they probably can't. So the family, again, brings them right back. Those people tend to be the most successful. So it's as Michael said, there's a lot of different issues. There's other issues as to the individuals that are lower functioning. Well, what do we do with those people? Because they need help. They're going to need support. On Petaluma right now, I think it's probably safe to say that we've seen people 5 or more times coming through residential, 5 or more times. And those individuals would need somebody to help them live their life for the rest of their life. So these individuals I'm talking about, living alone, it's not going to happen. But what do we do with those individuals?
Can I put up video?
Before,
You're not holding. But anyway, what I want to mention is, in Petaluma, I think it's a great program because I have seen some success rates come from there that only did 45-day treatment. And they're still not using meth. And so, we constantly think about this 1-year program for, it's up to the individual. And again, Petaluma is willing to let them stay as long as they want to. And so basically, we need continuity in these programs because like in November, December, part of January, this tribe basically cuts down, shuts off, because they're too busy being up and around at L&I and whatnot. Like you don't provide services at that time during those months.
We do.
You guys do?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so before you guys didn't, before you came up, program director. And it's just that, we need people here. The tribe needs to quit giving admin, every time we turn around and there's something going on because their services are for us, people that actually need it. And I want to address his thing about having children visit. Okay, CPS is just like any other program. They have a bottleneck here. So even if there was a designated time for family reunification or family visit, CPS would not be able to take the children in because they're transporting children everywhere, other places. So this reservation is just one whole big bottleneck.
What I'm going to say is I see this point. My husband and I have been foster parents since 1997, and that's when we adopted our first daughter. And we've taken lots of kids in over the years, and the families that I've seen have successful reunification are those that had long-term treatment. I mean, the parents had to do stuff. They were with us for about a year before they could go back with their parents, and they had successful reunions. And we still see those kids, they're adults now. Some of them some of them, since I've been working at the shelter, I've seen, because CPS is so strapped for resources and for help, they just go through personnel like crazy, and we depend on them because we get referrals from them. But the children that we get that are reunited with their parents almost quickly, I mean, I don't know for sure what goes on because we're not really involved with some of the discussion, but we know they're not ready, and we've heard of them, Some girls as young as 15 being out on the street, sleeping around, and the boys in another foster home, and it's just terrible, and it seems like those that quickly went down, that happened, but those that have long-term, it worked, and that's just been my experience, observation.
One of the things I think that we have to look at this problem not as a criminal problem, as a social problem. And one of the things that some of my staff, case management, for example, we have case managers in our facility, and a lot of times they're working as social workers. We have a lot of clients who come in who are going to need assisted living for the duration of their natural life. But what happens is these folks come in and they go back up and they're going back in the door again. And as we talked about earlier, a lot of them, as you know, there's very high rates of fetal alcohol on this reservation. It's always been. And these folks become adults at some point in time. And a lot of times they have children of their own. So realistically, they are not able to raise their children in a normalized setting to provide adequate life, the nurturing that these children need. They're not constitutionally capable of that, but we have an expectation again and again and again that they're supposed to do that and they can't. So the tribe, one of the things that is, we try to work on behalf of these folks to turn more to the state of South Dakota, because the tribe itself doesn't have a Department of Social Services for its own tribal members. The state of South Dakota, unfortunately, doesn't give a damn about the tribes. They don't, all 9 tribes, they don't care. They're overwhelmed themselves from just their own population. A lot of our, as you guys know, almost 3/4 of our population lives off the reservation. They live in the cities, and the same people that need help here are also in the city that need help up there. And so the state of South Dakota is overwhelmed with these. So we have this huge abyss, we call it the abyss, where these folks come out and they're expected to function in society. They have no economic opportunities, they have no social supports, they have no educational opportunities. These things are a reality, and this is, I would honestly ascertain that this is the primary reason for relapse. It's not the treatments, it's not them getting the stuff they need from the therapist, from people like himself or other therapists. It's when they go up, there's no social supports, there's no support system for them. So we built this huge network of, laws, advocacy, penal systems. Well, what about the social support? Something that it's a social issue. It shouldn't be a criminal issue, because the majority of the same people that you are in your facility, they're not facility. Same challenges they have with CPS about you guys are transporting people. I have, there's times where we only have 1 person on and we have 4 people transporting. Same thing with the dentists, because they have a lot of dental issues because of meth, or they have a lot of physical problems because they don't take care of their bodies, and their bodies are deteriorating over this period of time. So these are real problems. But what about the tribe trying to start a division of social services for adults? Now let's talk about the children, but what about the adults? Because a lot of these adults are vulnerable people. They can't take care of themselves. So these people that you call the meth dealers, these people that you call the ones that keep coming in our system. We have a gentleman who's been in our system 5 times, and I advocated for him 5 times. The day he gets out, he goes back and starts using that same day, because he has a impulse control disorder. He has behavioral health and or biological disorders that prohibit him from being able to control himself. He's not able to. So he needs to be in a place like Northern Hills Training Center, Black Hills Works, these places like this that can have assisted living for the duration of their life. We have a lot of our people that are like that. There's nobody helping them. Nobody.
I'd like to address that, Dakota. He stated that the state of South Dakora will want us and won't help us, and that's that's what is wrong, because we do have some of our young adults at Black Hills Works that was accepted. We can get that same program down here if our tribe chooses to, because basically how Black Hills works is they get, the funding that they receive is taking this guy's whole SSI check. And so that's how they pay for their rent up there in Black Hills Works. And so basically, you know, even treatment programs, a judge in Rapid City owns a treatment program. And that's funded through a person's SSI check or Medicaid, Medicare. So we can provide those same services here, but our tribal government does not have the ability or knowledge to check into things like this.
So those are all really good, and it's, I want to go on to the next one because keep in mind what you just said, because that is the very reason why we are here today. We want to be able to utilize and maximize what services that we do have. That is one of the reasons why our leadership had called for this meeting, so we can figure that out. And then thus the development of this task force. And so the next part of it I want to do, because I'm going to go over the next couple of slides quickly, but I also want to develop a few goals before we leave today. So that way we're going back to saying that we're going to identify some areas that we want to work on specifically that are achievable, and then set a team and a timeline for that, and then we'll set a next date to follow up on the work that we've been doing since then, and then go from there. So in this next slide I have here, it talks about capacity building. Capacity building is capacity involves the mobilization of resources within a geographic area, so within our reservation. A key aspect of capacity is convening key stakeholders, coalitions, and service providers to plan and implement sustainable prevention efforts. So all those things you were just talking about, we're going to go ahead and write them down. And then resources may include available financing, organizational support, that's us right now, what we're doing is coming together, and then joint partnerships. Readiness, cultural competence, and leadership should be strengthened through education and training. So keep in mind for the education department that. Additionally, capacity should include a focus on sustainability, as well as the evaluation capacity of it. So how does that look? By answering some of these. Find what you need to meet the substance abuse problem. Who are the people in your community whose help you need? Are they willing and capable of leading or carrying out the plan? So in the capacity building, what we're doing here is trying to identify achievable goals amongst the individuals in this room. So, and then get everyone on the same page about why this problem needs attention and what to do about it. How much money is needed to carry out the plan, and where do we get the funds? Resources available, and any funding opportunities, or who will be the team to apply to any funding? What other resources will be needed, and how do we get them? So, with that being said, you guys can start throwing some ideas out there around capacity building and how we can really look at this. Find out what you need to meet the substance abuse problem. I know a good idea that was generated already was long-term treatment is successful, a division of social services for adults, get assisted living for those people that are in need of other treatment because they aren't capable of controlling their own choices because of a type of disorder. Let's kind of build on that as well. Anybody got any ideas? Go ahead.
During the Obama administration, I don't know if many of you remember, but they changed the OMB, all the CFR, the name. A lot of the financial management, they went to OMB super circular. And what they found just through the studies is different departments, Department of Justice and other different types of things, they're doling out different rules, different procurement plans, that type of thing. And one of the things that came out of it was a seamless flow process, if you guys can remember that. And what they're trying to do is some of the things you said, get everyone on the same page, highway universal thing. But I think one of the problems here is that we have a disconnect between a lot of our social agencies here, corrections, treatment, courts. And so we're finding that there's a lot of this bureaucracy, or there's procedures, protocols that a lot of times inhibit the collaboration of efforts for the vulnerable populations that we serve. And I think that's one of the things is to do a study of like the bureaucracy, the red tape. You can't do this. One example was, for example, and I know this is bigger than just this work here, but we tried to get an office in the jail. And because it was owned by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we had to go through this whole process just to get a phone line in. And it was a 6-month endeavor just to get a phone line in so we could move into an office. And it was just a lot of red tape. And I think a lot of the time, our ability to help our populations is because all of our agencies are working autonomously, which they're supposed to, but at some point there has to be some collaboration of effort. There has to be put to take apart the bureaucracy and the red tape. I think that's where we find a lot of our issues.
Mike, you want to say something?
One of the things we did last year as far as capacity building, public safety, we had a contract with a couple of individuals that write grants for us. And, we got the grant process for Office of Justice Services and COPS programs coming up pretty quick for grants. So last year, Ann Cross, through the contracting office, kind of headed that up and called all of the entities together to talk about what grants they wanted to apply for under what sections of the grants. And I think that that's something we're going to have to do again very soon. So we can get a grant package in to obtain some resources for some of the things that we're talking about today. And I know the grants are not the total answer to it, I think that our legislatures and council is going to have to continually put pressure on Congress to adequately fund our base programs on this reservation. But I think right now the immediate future is probably getting together a team of people to work on the grant proposals that are coming up for 2020, 2021. So that would be my suggestion. Somebody's got to champion out on the tribal side. Maybe Anna get through the grants office. We may be able to provide the grant writers again, but we'll need the programs to come in. And I think she had a schedule last year, so each program at courts and different entities came in and presented their needs, and then kind of with the grant writers and the grant writers put together the proposals. So that's just a suggestion for now, and that's pretty immediate, within the next week or two.
Chief, did everybody get anything there last year? Just wondering when we were hearing back.
I think there was something, we didn't get any, I think.
None of these I asked for.
I think that, I read the loop does, I think that's, did you get some on CTAS grant for last year?
No.
No?
I think we applied, it was a couple of years ago maybe.
I remember last year, Ann was there, and we all gave proposals to our grant writer, and they submitted.
Yes.
Did you?
It didn't get funded.
Nothing out of CTAS got funded? Okay.
But I suspect it had to do with all the stuff that was going on. So now we're in a much better position.
That's a good.
Yeah, I think that because the tribe was on high risk at that point in time for the submission, we might have been down the answer. So now we're off of that. I think it's something we can move forward with.
Okay, definitely. All right, we're getting there, people. Going to the next slide here. All right, so exactly what we've been, what the chief just brought up. And so planning, we need to develop a detailed plan that will focus on the best ways to tackle the problem that was discovered. In step one, we all talked about all these different things and assessing meth and how we need to look at it. And then working on a piece of the problem that we can change. Okay. So the purpose of this project and what you want the results to be and how the community will be changed by this project. So we'll start the discussion by going back on, so far I think it's safe to say that we need a community education and awareness component to this. And who's going to be on that team to be able to provide those type of services. Then we have a treatment, we discussed treatment options and how that process looks. Also, I think an advocate's perspective, I guess what's missing here is to being able to provide adequate services regarding the high number of evaluations. I know one of the things you said you can do is do contracts to get providers to come in and do that. And so maybe develop a team around that initiative alone to help the high rate of people that aren't receiving evaluations.
But the other thing too, the Dakota, is if an advocate has a client, they should develop a ROI or a release of information with the provider, whether it's a pet loop or whoever, because there's going to be information that we provide the client, which may be translated different by the time it gets to the advocate. So the advocate, just like the family, should be a part of that process. So in order for them to do that, they just need to make sure that their client includes them as on the release of information. That way they can call us and say, hey, where is the eval? And if they call me, then I would have to do a review and get back to them.
I used to make the calls. I used to call Christy, where's the eval at? She'd take them to AOF. So we wouldn't see them, only time we see them would be in court, so, I meant to go to just drop them off at AOF and then put them in their records.
Yeah, so we still do that, but if there's a question, then the advocate should really be present to communicate with us. So that's, and we don't usually, I remember seeing Henny when she was an advocate, but we don't see too many other advocates too often.
That's a whole separate set of issues there. I mean, I've never seen any, she was an advocate, I've never seen her FTA for court, but we have a lot of advocates charge the clients money, don't even hear their bench trials when they're supposed to be defending them. So that's the whole, it's beyond the scope of this group, but yeah, I mean, you're right, it's an issue.
What about just looking at this big plan? Okay, one example, I talked to our director here. We had a discussion earlier this week, and one of them is we're opening the detox center, and it's something that hasn't been done before. And one of the things is, a lot of the time is we're laying the track as the train's coming, and that's unfortunately not best practices, but that's how it is, especially when we work in a governmental agency. And one of the things that we discussed is there was a lot of, as we start to explore different models out there of how to open this detox center and what that's going to look like, they started bringing up a lot of questions that we had no answers to. We have some opinions, but for example, we toured a detox center in Rapid City, okay, and the lady there said that a lot of their protocols and procedures were developed over a number of years of trial and error. Okay? And so one of the things that we were fortunate to do is we have another agency people who on there have experience in developing a detox center. So we're hoping to bring these people in as consultants. So in something like this, is we're trying to develop a plan, a model. Is there anyone out there doing research on maybe something that's already established
established out there, something that we can grab. And we could say, hey, let's take a component of this, let's take a component of that, and mod it and tweak it a little bit to fit our need. Has anyone looked at maybe seeing if there's any people with consultants about designing these types of models, or is there, because a lot of the experience, I know there's a collective amount of experience, I'm not saying that, but there is probably things that maybe we don't know, we don't understand, we can't figure out. That maybe somebody to help us navigate us through the entire process. Is that something that was even thought of, like researching other tribes, for example? If we don't want to use it, we want to use just native tribes. Navajo Nation's got some of this stuff established. Have we ever done a trip down there? Just as an example.
So does Wind River. And Wind River has a lot to show for where they started to where they are now.
All right, well, thank you guys for that, because that's also part of the, I think that can go into this. First things first, though, is that we need to be able to utilize what little resources we have, and not all of us can always go on travel just to research what other tribes are doing, whenever we can utilize what we have here and try to make that work. So according to the kind of like this process here, it's almost time for us to conclude, so I'm going to go ahead and just, I want to be able to confirm some goals here before we kind of begin our conclusion of this, is that for one, we need to build a team, and who's going to be a part of that to develop that treatment process, and then getting those adequate services for the evals that need to be completed, and then assessment of needs, and to be able to assess and identify what we need around this meth epidemic, and then write for grants for those. And the first one I can think of is the chief here being on that team, because he offered to provide for the grant writer. So if it is very well that that group says we need to do a little bit more research and do a little bit more travel, then write a grant for that, to get that, to make that happen, to better improve what we're doing here. That's just an idea, it doesn't have to be done, but I just want to be able to identify some realistic goals here before we go. And then the last is community wellness component. To be able to educate the communities and the schools. We're going to need a team to develop how that's going to look. Whether you take this PowerPoint presentation on meth and you share it in every community during health summits, and get some food and some water, and go do this consistently until you go into all of our communities, and that's the goal. That's what we say we'll do in that. That's just an example right there. And then I like the idea from the January 16th. We've had discussion amongst relatives, neighbors, friends about, one of the ways that to combat this is, and prevent it from happening, is to catch it at our borders. And so the AJ here had mentioned that and brought it up, and I was just really enlightened by that fact that, because we had that same discussion. It was like, okay, people are bringing that on the reservation. We have our own reservation here. Why can't we ask and work towards and maybe write up a proposal? And this would probably be a team of, I don't know who, to tribal council, to say, let's call for the VIA to have border patrol here, to give us the adequate training that we need to provide to our tribal enrolled members, and have the border patrol at each entry point on the reservation, And then that'll not only help us combat the drugs, illegal drugs that are coming onto our reservation, but around the murdered and missing people that are, the missing people that, and then preventing people from being kidnapped and things like that. But it also can record how many people is going to be coming on our reservation that are non-tribal members, and then what is the purpose for visiting here, how long are they going to visit, where exactly are they going to go, and when are they going to leave, so we're tracking that. It'll also help us get a better understanding of taking a step more, to record, how many tourists coming through here the summer times, you know, so you can get a lot out of that. And I think that, that's a good idea, it's not a bad idea, you know, we wanna catch it right at our reservation borderline, so, you know, those are just generated thoughts, and if you guys have any specific goals, we wanna be able to establish those goals, and then who's gonna be on that team. So what do you guys think about those goals?
I have two things. On the evals, because I was talking with Fabian anyway, that's kind of been an ongoing.
Okay.
You know, the vendors, I think what's needed, Gene, is more vendors to do those evals, and then Fabian said he has money to do that, but we just need to.
Better streamline that process, right?
Yeah, because it entails going down to FAO too, so.
Okay, so we have Fabian, Betty, and Jean on that,
But
treatment
Gene, I was
process.
just pointing at her. It's, she's
You should just do intervention. You know how to do intervention.
So see, I think with your idea, you can throw onto that little team right there.
And then
I
you
got
put
something for you. When I was in 6th grade, we had police moved out here, and in 6th grade, we learned of drugs and alcohol, and it hit us right at the right age. So I think that if you brought someone in from education to request them to give a complete detail of drugs and alcohol at the 6th grade level, make it a class, a whole semester.
That's true.
And then my second question, I kind of missed out, but did I hear you say that Bob's going to pay for a grant writer? Is that for the 2020 CTAS Bob?
Well, we did last time.
Oh, you did last year? You
Yeah,
paid
last
for it?
time, Ann Cross headed up coordination of it. We allowed public safety grant writers to head it up and to write the grants, but I'm not quite sure whether we got anything out of it, but a good point that was brought up, the tribe at that time was on high risk as far as Department of Justice, so now that we're off of high risk, maybe our opportunity would be much better in getting more grants, so. And I'm willing to do whatever we can to help that process. So maybe with the executive director, maybe get with Dean Patton and contracting office and this kind of the grants coordinating lead there, her and Olivia, and see if they'd be willing to head that up again.
Because I'm interested in 3 purpose areas for the court.
So for the grant?
Out of that CTAS grant, yeah. 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. And then,
Probation
so now
officers and.
so now we have community wellness, awareness, and education. Do you have any volunteers for that?
I'm overwhelmed. We lost our quarter of our education component left.
Everyone
Maybe you
was
said that out.
delegating some
Yeah,
tasks.
you're delegating some tasks now.
Alright, so I know Leah, she said, let me know what you need, we'll try to help you, so. You're gonna be on the community wellness component of it, alright? And then, so, I think, we have some goals here, now we need to set a next, date. How long do you anticipate that, NCRAFT can get us a meeting? And then how long will it take for you to come up with a plan, to initiate the communities? And then how long do you think it will take Fabian to, figure out this, get this,
What we talked about was just a checklist, and then he knows some vendors that need to get their tribal license. So I said, well, maybe I'll just make a little checklist, because I know vendors have a difficult time kind of going through our process down there. You have to go to Bob Palmer's office to get your vendor's license and all of that.
Yeah.
Probably a month.
1 month from today?
February 25th.
Yeah, so we're on a very short time frame.
Okay, what about 2 weeks?
We have to be like
On the CTAS,
next week, yeah.
I'm ready now.
This group's not gonna be able to do it.
Yeah, we can't.
Meeting across the community,
Yeah.
get a group going and.
Could you ask Dean to assign Ann out here, like next week?
Okay.
And let's discuss CTEF.
Okay. I'll try
Yeah,
for
that's
this.
almost no time to get that done.
So for
I gotta go pick up payroll.
the rest, we'll call a meeting for 2 weeks, just to give us an update on stuff that you've been initiating. And then I have some resources if you need it. All right, well, thank you guys for coming, appreciate your time. And we want to leave in a good way. Can we have a closing prayer? Anybody like to volunteer?
Closing prayer?
Oh.
Okay.